Hello students, welcome to Drona Edu. I am Manjushri. In this class, I am going to teach 8th standard science, chapter 8, friction. We'll know what we are going to study in this chapter. What do you do to stop a moving bicycle? What do? You apply a brake, right? Have you ever thought why a vehicle slows down when you apply the brake? Okay, we'll see further why the vehicle stops. Not only vehicles, any object for that matter moving over a surface of another object slows down when no external force is applied on it. Okay, finally it stops, right? When you roll a ball on the floor, what happens? It goes to a certain extent, covers a certain distance and it stops. Am I right? So after this what happens? It stops. Why it is so? Have you not seen a moving ball on the ground stopping after some time? You have observed, right? Why it is stopping? Why do we slip when we step on a banana peel? We tend to slip on the banana peel, right? Why do we slip on it? Why it is difficult to walk on a smooth and wet floor? What happens when you walk on the smooth floor or the wet floor? It slips, right? So why it is happening? Now in this chapter we are going to get answers for all of the questions and clarify why it is happening. Okay, this is force of friction. Let's take an example. Gently push a book on the table. On the table, keep your book, push it. What happens? It goes and stops at certain position, right? Then again push from there also. Okay? What happens now? Push it in the opposite direction. What happens? It comes and stops at certain place. Am I right? So this is done because of the force of friction. With this we can tell that the force of friction always opposes the applied force. Okay, you are applying a force on the book on one direction, but what is happening here? Some force is opposing this applied force. Okay, it is opposing the force applied by you and making a book stop, right? This is the force of friction. It always will be opposing the applied force. The force of friction always opposes the applied force. Let's see what are the factors that are affecting this friction. Let's consider an example. Take a brick, okay? Tie a string to the brick, okay? With the spring balance. Spring balance is a small device which is used to measure the force acting on an object, okay? When you hang something to the spring balance, what happens? It pulls the spring balance due to the force acting on the object. The gravitational force that acts on the objects make the spring balance pull itself so that the coiled spring inside the spring balance will be stretched, okay? Will be stretched so that the stretching of this spring is measured by the pointer moving on the graduated scale. The scale is marked inside the spring balance. The spring stretches so that it goes and points somewhere. This point is measured. Okay, this is spring balance. The spring balance is tied with a string and it is tied to the brick. Did you understand? Now what you are going to do is you are keeping the brick on the table. Okay, you start dragging it. Initially it's little difficult to drag, but finally when you start dragging it, it starts giving a reading on the spring balance, right? When the brick is just begin to move, you can see a mark, okay? You can see a reading there. Am I right? You can see a reading on the spring balance when you drag a brick with a string, and it gives you a measure of the force of friction. Okay, this is the force of friction and this is the measure of force of friction between the surface of the brick and the floor. or the table which you are keeping your brick on. Okay, so this is how you measure the friction, okay, force of friction between the surface and the object. Even if the surface looks too smooth, it will be having a large number of irregularities on them. Okay, we can see the tiles, very smooth surface, right? But even the tiles, very smooth tiles, will be having minute irregularities on them, which makes this friction to act upon the object which is moving on the tiles. Okay, it is obvious that the force of friction will increase if the two surfaces are pressed harder. What it means? If the object is heavier, what happens? It tends to press harder due to the gravitational force. It tends to press harder on the surface, right? So, if two surfaces are pressed harder, then it is obviously the force of friction which is increased there. Okay, more weight, more friction. The force of friction will be increased with the weight of the object. Okay, the force required to overcome the friction at the instant an object starts moving from the rest is a measure of static friction. Okay, when you measure a friction which makes a object overcome its friction while you are pulling an object from the rest, there is an object which is at its rest. For example, I told you brick, right? The brick is at its rest. Okay, you have tied a string. Now you are pulling it, right? You are pulling a string. Okay, it is at rest. While it leaves its rest and starts moving, then it is called static friction. Okay, the friction, the force required to overcome the friction at the instant an object starts moving from the rest is a measure of static friction. Tell me, what is static friction? The force required to overcome the friction at that instant an object starts moving, just starts moving from the rest is a measure of static friction. Okay. On the other hand, we have something called sliding friction. Let's see what is sliding friction. The force applied, it is required to keep the object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. If you didn't understand anything, please comment below and let me know. Please give me the questions you have doubts on so that I reply to you. Okay? I want you all to engage yourself with this chapter and ask me more doubts so that I understand you are listening to me. Did you understand? So with this, I say bye.